My name is Jay Rush. I'm going to talk about TrueBlocks, the world's first truly decentralized account explorer. This is in support of our Gitcoin grant, number 184, and because of the matching, every DAI counts, so we appreciate every contribution. I'm going to start with the architecture of the software, talk about some of the accuracy that we see on other platforms, talk about why local software is both faster and way more private. I'm going to show you how we reconcile accounts, and then I'm going to talk briefly about something I call user-centric browsing. So just to get started with the architecture, of course you need an Ethereum node. Our software is pure Ethereum. TrueBlocks interacts with the node through the RPC like everything else, and I'm going to explode that so we can see inside. There's a scraper, an indexer, which writes to a database, and there's a digester. The digester reads the index periodically and creates a snapshot and writes that to IPFS. I don't have time to explain that today, but I'll do a video later about that. Unlike most other scrapers, our scraper only indexes addresses. We don't extract the entire database. We leave it on the Ethereum node until we need it. This is why TrueBlocks works on a local machine, because we've actually created the minimal possible database. We added an API to the database and a UI, even though the API is unnecessary because both these pieces of software are on the same machine. And because we don't have all the data, the UI has to communicate back with the Ethereum node to get the transactional details. So I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Miriam, who's going to give a demonstration of the software. This is what it looks like. And you'll see some of these issues that I think are really interesting related to local software.
So just to orient you, this is the dashboard view. It shows you each of TrueBlocks' 11 modules. This is the status panel to the right. It gives you information about the status of the system, the API, how far the scraper is synced, and a bunch of other things. Here's the help panel. No matter where you're at in TrueBlocks, you can always get help. I like to keep these panels closed so I can see more information. I'm going to focus on just one module today called monitors. You can monitor as many addresses as you want. Here we're monitoring 81 addresses. We've told TrueBlocks to monitor these addresses. Only when we do that does TrueBlocks extract the transactional data from the chain. This is why TrueBlocks works on a local machine. We create the smallest database we can manage and still make things work. Notice also that the addresses are named. You can do that via the names module. For example, this is our Gitcoin grant address. Naming addresses adds immeasurably in helping you understand the history of your accounts, a point I'll come back to later. Okay, so first I'm going to copy the TrueBlocks address, and then I'm going to double click on it, and that will start the monitor. You can see down here that the API, which is running locally, is connecting to the Ethereum node, which is also running locally. The back end is extracting the transactions. While that happens, I'll open up Etherscan and paste in the TrueBlocks address. Etherscan tells me that there are 76 regular transactions, but looking at the internal transactions and the token transactions, we get to a total of 231 total transactions. Now let's go back to TrueBlocks and see what it says. It says there are actually 210 transactions. What's the difference? This is something we've looked at pretty carefully. In fact, we recently published a Medium article titled How Accurate is Etherscan? The upshot is Etherscan duplicates records across the 4 different transaction types or tabs. When we remove the duplicates, Etherscan actually only has 196 transactions. So there's still a difference between Etherscan and TrueBlocks. So what does this mean? Etherscan, as it turns out, is missing transactions. We've started looking into this in the article I mentioned. And I will mention also that we've reviewed hundreds of addresses, and in more than 80% of cases, TrueBlocks finds more unique transactions than Etherscan does. Etherscan never finds more than TrueBlocks. As crazy as this seems, Etherscan, in our opinion, is wrong. We suspect this is part of the reason why it's hard to reconcile your accounting using Etherscan. I'll talk about reconciliation a little bit later on. The first point we want to make in this video is that TrueBlocks is more accurate than Etherscan. And remember, TrueBlocks is fully decentralized. That is, it's a local piece of software. As we're about to see, that means it's actually faster than a website like Etherscan. In addition to greater accuracy, TrueBlocks is both faster and provides much better privacy. Let me explain. TrueBlocks is not a website, it's fully local. There's a single user, and there's only a single machine, and it's your machine. Using TrueBlocks feels much more like using an Excel spreadsheet than it does using a website. The entire history of our TrueBlocks wallet is displayed on the left, and as I scroll, the details of the transactions are being displayed on the right. Notice also that I've named these accounts so I can more quickly understand what's happening. For example, here's ENS, here's Common Stack. If I look at the right, you can see which function we called on that smart contract. In this case, donate. And here you can see the events that we generated. Now let's look at Etherscan. They also have a summary of the transactions here, but where are the details? In order to see the details, I have to go into a transaction, and then I come back out, and then go into the next transaction, and then come back out. Each time I go in or out, I lose the context of what I'm looking at. I think everyone can agree with me when I say that it's nearly impossible to understand what's going on. And as you can see, only a few of these addresses are named. Etherscan has a naming function, but I've never used it because in order to use it, I have to log in, and as soon as I do that, Etherscan knows the names of my addresses. It's none of their business what the names of my addresses are. This brings me to my second point. There's a privacy issue, not only with Etherscan, but also with most Web 3.0 dApps. They are actually just Web 2.0 websites with Web 3.0 injected. This privacy issue does not exist with local software such as TrueBlocks. As I said, the details show up over here. I can expand or contract the details. I like to keep the details contracted until I need them. As I scroll, you can see that the scrolling is nearly instantaneous. That's because we don't have to go to a remote server to get the data the way a web page does. We're local. We can open the data directly. So the third point I want to make is that TrueBlocks is faster, and your donations will help us make it even faster. I hope you're starting to see that TrueBlocks is quite different than a website such as Etherscan. With TrueBlocks, you don't have to go anywhere to get the data. The Ethereum node brings the data to you. And this brings me to my fourth point. TrueBlocks is not only faster, but it helps you arrive at an understanding of what happened on your account almost effortlessly. Let me show you what I mean. As I scroll through these transactions, you can see I'm encountering smart contracts that I've interacted with. In other words, I'm not switching to different pages the way I have to on Etherscan. Better yet, I don't have to go to the smart contracts website to see what happened, which, by the way, is another privacy invasion. The data is right here, right in front of me. For example, on this one screen, I can see a number of transactions related to when I joined the Common Stack. Back in November of 2019, I sent 5 Ether to this wallet from Coinbase. You can see the benefit of naming addresses here. In this transaction, the balance of the account went from 0 to 5 Ether, and we reconciled the transaction here. The next day, I sent 3 transactions from Coinbase to single collateral DAI, transferring DAI to my TrueBlocks wallet. On that same day, I twice donated to the Common Stack. This shows up as these 4 transactions. First, I approved the transfer with Psy, then I made the donation to Common Stack, and then I did it again. Approve. Donate. By the way, you should donate to these guys. They're doing great work. So these 7 transactions are me joining the Common Stack. All the data is shown in a single view without having to switch to different pages. Finally, after 5 years, I can see what happened to my money. And it gets even better than that. Another thing you can do with TrueBlocks is search and filter. I can enter the word common here, and only transactions related to Common Stack show up. Here's the November 2nd donations. And then on November 5th, the people at the Common Stack started voting on my membership. Again, you can see why naming addresses is so important in helping you understand what's happening. Here, Lorelei voted on my membership. Thank you, Lorelei. Here's Jeff Emmett voting. Thanks for your support. And of course, here's my favorite person in this space, Griff Green, and I'm in. We've also created a few pre-canned filters here. This button shows all the token transfers this address has been involved in. These 2 buttons show or hide airdrops. Here we're showing all the direct neighbors of the address. A direct neighbor is any address this address has interacted with directly. Here we're showing a balance history for the address. The possibilities here are endless. We hope to add a feature to allow the end user to save their own filters. Here we're showing the function calls for each transaction. You get a lot of information out of this. Try doing any of this on Etherscan or anywhere else for that matter. Making my 5th point, you can see that searching and sorting, and especially bringing the transactions together into a single view, makes understanding what you've done much easier. We call this pattern user-centric browsing. What I'm not doing is going to the Ethereum name service website, I'm not going to the Maker website, and I'm not going to the Common Stack website. The node is bringing the data to me. I am in control. No one can keep me from the data. No one knows I'm interested in it. This is what I think of when I think of distributed computing and the real vision for Web 3.0. This is what we mean by user-centric. Before we finish, there's one other thing we want to show you. Reconciliation earlier and pointed to this green circle. This circle means TrueBlocks was able to reconcile this transaction to the blockchain. Beginning balance plus incoming minus outgoing equals ending balance. TrueBlocks reconciles every transaction and also reconciles one transaction to the next. Presumably, the blockchain is always perfectly accurate, so if something doesn't reconcile, we know that either A, we didn't understand something, or B, there are on-chain transactions that we're not accounting for. Initially, airdrops were an example of this. Reconciling to the chain has allowed us to improve TrueBlocks to the point where, today, every account we've tested, except a few minor accounts, balances to 18 decimal places. Joe Lubin, back in 2015, inspired us to think about instant auditing and radical transparency. This is a realization of those amazing ideas. I don't know of any other Ethereum-based software, centralized or decentralized, that can balance accounts like this. Oh, and before I forget, you can export these reconciled 18 decimal place transactions to your accountant or to QuickBlocks or even crypto accounting sites like Rocky or Veriledger. So the final point I'll make in this video then is this. As smart contracts get more complicated, particularly in the DeFi space, the issue of reconciliation becomes even more and more important. Significant usage of Ethereum will be stunted, I think, until we get perfect off-chain reconciliation and auditing. Otherwise, why would anyone change?
Thanks, Miriam. So just to conclude, TrueBlocks, just like your Ethereum node, is fully decentralized. It runs on your local machine. It's mostly open source. It's private, uncensorable. It's also faster than a website. It's more accurate than Etherscan or any other solution we know of. It reconciles to 18 decimal places. And the user experience, we think, is better because the history is consolidated into a single view. There's no context switching. You're able to search and sort and filter your data. We call this whole idea user-centric browsing. So thank you for listening. Remember, we have a Gitcoin grant, 184. It's called TrueBlocks. And because of the matching, every DAI counts, and we'd appreciate any donations you can give us. Thank you very much. Take care. Stay safe.